The link in the description is only there to see the source material. Do not under any circumstance go to these people with the intent to be a dick. I don't support witch hunts or lynch mobbing, so don't be either. As for the subjects themselves, my video is for the purposes of criticism and entertainment. Take it or leave it. My content is not here to start drama. Please do not treat it like it is. This video talks about some controversial and potentially triggering topics. Viewer discretion is advised. So I'm kind of dealing with what I might start calling blinking motivation, because I'm frankly going through the ringer, trying to get in contact with the hospital to work out an issue with my stomach so I can stop living on purely fruits and crackers because I need substance. I feel miserable and demotivated doing this. However, a burst of motivation to make a commentary surged through me when I saw the video we'll be covering today. Now, for context, I don't know if y'all follow my friend Beaten Mitsuru, but if you do, then congrats, you're probably caught up. For those who aren't, let me introduce you all to Spoctor. He was an ex-DeviantArt ranter turned ex-commentator after an incident occurred surrounding him involving false allegations and basically slander. Now I'm not sure what he is as far as content goes, especially since as of scripting these intro statements I've noticed he's made a video taking a leave from commentaries that as of scripting this I had yet to sit down and watch, but it's only vaguely important for now. We'll come back to it later. Lately, he's gotten into some more controversy, this time surrounding him being a, to put it bluntly, dismissive prick who totes himself around as holier than thou. It's not great on his end, and to be honest, I do think he deserves some of the criticism that has been going this way, especially so when you account for how he's handled another situation involving the names junkie. This ties into Heaton's video. Now, I'm not here to talk about that video, but I will link it below as I think her input is very valuable. But I bring up her video because there was something she said that segues into the video that I will be talking about today.
Holy shit! How the fuck has only Linlin commentated on this video? This is peak victim blaming and tone policing. His own fucking snout. How did you not see this?
So, Linlin, previously known as Lindata. For longer time viewers of mine, you most certainly do remember that name. After her stroll through the slideshow commentary community, she wound up jumping into the shark-infested waters known as the more broader commentary sphere. Art commentators, drama boys, you know, stuff like that. Think like your Harley TBS's and Tom Darks, because those are the only two names I know in that sphere, and to be frank, I'm too lazy to find closer examples right now. Anyway, she's also talked about Spoctor in a video called Spoctor is a Problem, and, well, there's a reason I'm here, so let's talk about it.
The first of Spoctor's videos that we will be taking a look at was one that he posted about how minors should not join this community. Overall, the video is actually pretty solid and makes quite a few good points. However, the way that these points are made and the conclusion that they are used to draw on is irritating in my opinion. For instance, Spoctor mentions a lot of the different flaws that come with the job of being a content creator. Primarily that it can lead to people meeting others that could end up being harmful for them mentally. And Spoctor is correct in saying that. Speaking from my own personal experience, being a YouTuber has caused me to cross paths with a couple of individuals who I wish I never did due to tolls taken on my mental health.
Keep this in mind. I'm gonna call back to it here in a bit.
The cancellation that went through with me in 2018 was a horrific thing that happened to me. It was stupid, it was nasty, but it was definitely falsified. But in my hindsighted opinion, I needed that. Not in the sense that I enjoyed it. No, I wouldn't ever want someone to go through what I did. No, I don't want anyone to go through something that I did like that. But it taught me that I wasn't It opened my eyes to a lot of my toxic, gross behavior. Fortunately, the only thing I was guilty of was being a toxic asshole. And some people saw that, and some people saw through that. However, I certainly wasn't guilty of the things that they made it out to be in you know, the accusations. So when I look back on 2018 now, it certainly was a smear campaign. But it was a smear campaign that was them trying to take down a shithead kid who thought he had all the power in the world. And it certainly worked in the short term, but in the long term, you know, I guess they found out that those that were accusing me were a lot worse than I was, so I ended up with a slap on the wrist. I promised to do better since then. I made that promise twice again when I turned 18. And, you know, I was a selfish kid going through all kinds of puberty, and that following that I had fed a monster of an ego, which enhanced my selfishness even more. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating a little bit, maybe I'm overplaying how bad I actually was with people, but but I know there's a lot of people out there who I used to interact with that might agree with this sentiment. I'm a better person now, and after 2 to 3 years, I can say that with confidence, and hopefully in another 4 years I can say the same thing, because I'm still not perfect, obviously, and I still mismanage things, but that's on my end, and that's personal to me.
So, why we leaving all of this in? I get it's for context purposes, and trust me, that's gonna become an important talking point later, but here, during this bit, it really isn't. You only really touch on what comes after the story and not the story itself. The story itself just becomes drawn out and, spoilers, pretty antithetical towards your overall message here, but again, we'll come back to that here in a sec.
Having a following at that age fucked me up in ways I couldn't even see at the time, and it could have gone really bad if I didn't snap out of who I was becoming. The people that I associated with were nasty, the friends that I made were untrustworthy, and looking back on it, a lot of the people I made friends with back then, I don't even know if I can ever trust ever again. I don't even know if they were trustworthy to begin with. I don't want other kids that try to be YouTubers to go through what I did. I see others go through what I did. The internet isn't nice to kids, and the internet isn't forgiving to kids. Once someone has their fame, they have to run with it. And once they lose it, that shot is over.
However, if we accept that minors shouldn't join the space because they end up meeting unhealthy people, then that would also mean that almost any social event should be something that they should stay away from as well. Things like conventions, sporting events, cinema going, or even more mandatory things in society like education and general employment, all have the exact same problem.
Not exactly. There's kind of a big line between isolated in a space online and in a public space where you can physically be around people you can trust or can have a person to turn towards. Your examples all have pretty clear-cut rules and laws in place that can protect a minor if things get a little rocky. Plus, when you're going out to a convention or movie, parental supervision is often recommended for kids anyway. Maybe not all kids follow those rules, but that doesn't change that they are in place. An online space doesn't have that many rules and regulations that would protect a minor from being the target of malicious actors, and parents frankly cannot keep up with what their kids are doing 9 times out of 10, so you're in a much more vulnerable state in comparison. I know this doesn't change how many malicious actors there are out in the wild, trademark, but my point is to put it all into perspective. Either way, you need to be more cautious when you're not an adult, more so if you're expecting to get some sort of following on a social media platform. Something that Spoctor clarifies a few times within his opening statements.
Having a following at that age fucked me up in ways I couldn't even see at the time, and it could have gone really bad if I didn't snap out of who I was becoming. The people that I associated with were nasty, the friends that I made were untrustworthy, and looking back on it, a lot of the people I made friends with back then, I don't even know if I can ever trust ever again. I don't even know if they were trustworthy to begin with. I don't want other kids that try to be YouTubers to go through what I did. I see others go through what I did. The internet isn't nice to kids, and the internet isn't forgiving to kids. Once someone has their fame, they have to run with it, and once they lose it, that shot is over. Getting that fame as a minor can ruin that shot and temper with the way people view you forever. There are people out here that still think I'm a creep because of 2018, and honestly, I really don't care, because that's all they know me for. They didn't bother to come back and find out how it all ended. That's just the nature of the internet.
That's something else Lynn here seems to kind of misread. Spoctor has specifically cited the following that he had at that age as part of the problem that he's talking about. With spaces like school and the workplace, you might be popular within those settings, but you wouldn't be famous enough for a couple 100,000 people to know who you are and be under that level of scrutiny on a day-to-day basis. Like, look, I'm not even that popular despite my subscriber base, and I know damn well what Spoctor alludes to when he talks about how getting big that early on can fuck you up. I blew up in 2016 when I was 19, and I couldn't handle it. I cracked under pressure on a multitude of occasions, oftentimes pretty publicly, and that's to say nothing of the people that I was surrounded by at that time. I had a Kiwi Farms page dedicated to me before the recent events with that site. My name is plastered onto someone else's Encyclopedia Dramatica page. My name is synonymous with things typically seen as negative, with the first things people see of me when they hear of me are old fetish arts and roleplays I did when I was still a teenager. Of course, I probably shouldn't have to explain this to someone who I know follows my work. You should be more than acquainted enough with my reputation to know that Spoctor is not an isolated incident. However, then we get the rest of your points here.
And staying away from those things out of fear of the worst can actually be quite the isolating experience. And in terms of mental health, I can speak from experience when I say that being isolated heavily out of that fear can be just as bad.
But Spoctor isn't telling you to isolate yourself. He's telling you not to jump in head first into a situation that can put you in a vulnerable or otherwise potentially dangerous scenario.
My point here is that putting such a blanket statement like this on minors becoming content creators doesn't logically work as well as you may think at first, as it needs to completely ignore the fact that parts of the real world that are often mandatory for being a part of modern society can have the exact same issues.
Maybe if you're a child celebrity, possibly, but don't even get me started on those.
And I feel like the way that this argument was delivered with no regard for that simply serves as fear-mongering that stops someone from trying something that they otherwise might have really enjoyed.
You know, that might have been a valid point if there wasn't a time where children stop being children. Like, Spoctor's whole point here, if we were to go off the logic that he wants children to not be commentators, is for kids to hold off on being commentators. Not to tell everyone to steer clear of the genre. That's not to say that when they're a little bit older and can handle the potential fame that they could get from making these kinds of videos that they shouldn't do it. It's just that when you're this young, there are a lot of problems that can come from that new responsibility of a platform. Like, your whole point here reads as, God, I'm 16, I'm basically an adult, Mom.
And this is especially compounded by the fact that a lot of this video was built around the personal experiences of both Spoctor and Harley BTS, as this was a video that they made together. And while I in no way seek to invalidate the struggles that they both had being content creators, I feel like using Spoctor especially as an example is presenting the absolute worst case scenario when what happened to him was arguably a byproduct of the DeviantArt ranting community being full of people who did not know how to handle allegations so serious.
Hold up. Do you actually remember the situation surrounding Spoctor, Lynn? Because the mishandling of allegations wasn't the crux of the problems during that drama. Pentagram and Stories wanted to ruin someone's career.
Poor Lizard Boy was actually someone that Penagrin wanted to drag down because he thought that someone was lying about their age online and appreciated it being called out in a video. Apparently, that was enough excuse for her to go for the throat, as she herself puts it. Oh, but evidently, despite also having wanted to get him in on taking down Digby in November of 2017, she's been waiting to take Spoctor down for a while. Well now, isn't that a tad telling?
Like, you can call Spoctor's situation the worst case scenario all you want. All it realistically does is do the exact thing you said you didn't want to do in underplaying the situation surrounding him, because it was the conscious effort of two bad actors that led the situation to start to begin with. Even going as far as to, get this, manipulate a minor to help be a third prosecutor in making the allegations against him. What this tells me is that you're making a point without knowing anything about the information you're using. Good job.
My point is that using this absolutely worst case scenario like this, when the nuance of the example that almost the entirety of the video was built on, would show that such is significantly less likely to happen now, especially with the Deviant Weeb community being a completely separate community from this one.
Anyone else feel like this statement is kinda holier than thou? Or is that just me? Because to me, it feels like Lynn is kind of looking down on the DeviantArt ranting community from atop her commentary community pedestal, and I don't think I like it.
To conclude, this video feels like it is trying to pass off so many things as being systemic problems within the commentary community, and using that as a way to dissuade people who may be able to bring a whole lot to the community from ever joining it. When people like Harley can prove that even if said creator is a minor, they are able to bring a lot to the community if they have enough of a drive to move past mistakes that they make and improve from them.
So, this point's funny to me. Do you guys want to know what Harley brings to the video? Because you're gonna love this.
My channel never really went anywhere with these videos, and I stayed mostly in complete irrelevance until I started doing commentary around 10 months ago, which is when I started very quickly garnering an audience I'd never seen before. But this audience wasn't very positive. I made a lot of videos on the Yandere Simulator drama, and my opinions were different to the rest. And I made a lot of videos on this topic because I was very invested in it, which led to people labeling me a milker. The like to dislike ratios on these videos are atrocious, but I'm still proud of them because they represent a lot for me opening up, and although at the time, seeing people try to dox me, blast me and all that definitely stressed me a bunch, with a whole lot of hate comments, I'd experienced worse in my real life. So I just kept pushing forward. During this time I also met a lovely fellow called prison mate Lou. I thought he was pretty nice, but obviously my experiences with Luke haven't been as peachy as I'd have hoped, because of our drama with each other, which definitely f***ed me up mentally. I didn't bode well with hundreds of thousands of people sent at me for claims that weren't true, out of nowhere, and I ended up in a really bad place. I actually had one of the worst panic attacks I've ever experienced because of that drama. I was shaking when his video released, and it definitely hasn't done well for my mental health at all. However, one or two sour apples don't ruin the bunch. I've made many friends and met many kind people in this community. I don't want that to go ignored because I'm mostly speaking negatively here. I have had a lot of bad experiences with commentary though, from the pyro-cynical drama where my poor turtling of a video got me crucified by half of the community, to the Dream and John Swan drama, where, under a spotlight of literally millions, I was pressured a lot and blasted with a captivated audience a metric ton larger than anything I'd ever experienced. These experiences have given me more strength, but also have severely damaged my mental health. I'm lucky that I'm quite capable of defending myself and can keep my head up, because I don't think a lot of people could actually take what I've experienced and keep going. Experiencing this type and caliber of drama is not easy for anyone, let alone teenagers. It's why I advise most teenagers not to do commentary or get involved in big drama at all, because if they get anywhere with it, they'll be torn apart by it. I'm very confident in myself and strong-willed, and I have a clear goal and I will achieve my dreams. That's why I believe I'm able to stomach commentary.
While Harley is certainly more optimistic about commentary as a whole than Spoctor is, even going on to say how appreciative they are in the position they're in, even they agree with Spoctor's caution of teenagers joining the commentary community at a younger age, because of the negative impact the internet can have on one's mental health. But Linlin is insisting that Harley should be a good example of the contrary to what Spoctor is saying when they just aren't. Not even by their own admission? Actually, wait. While rewatching the video Spoctor made, and I was almost about to overlook this, but do you want to know what his concluding statements are? Like, the whole point Spoctor was making within his video?
All in all, doing commentary can really suck you into this hole as a creator where you're surrounded by this negativity and nastiness all the time. And if someone isn't ready to handle that, or doesn't have something in their personal life to fall back on, then it has a potential to snowball into something horrible, especially for kids. Snowballing into something they don't wish to become, and it can be extremely stressful. So do I really encourage people to become YouTubers? Not really. It's a hard job. But I always hope that those that manage to break the odds and manage to do it find a flow that keeps them mentally healthy, because YouTube is hard.
So again, we're back at this point that Spoctor isn't saying what Lin is insinuating he's saying. In fact, he's not even saying that minors shouldn't get into commentary, but rather that if one does get into it, then they better be prepared for the constant string of negativity that comes with that environment. So this is wrong in two places, and if this is the standard for what's to come for the rest of the video, then I'm not gonna be very happy.
I don't blame Spoctor for the way that his personal experiences have dealt damage to his mental health at all, but using that as a case study of sorts to build an entire argument around it feels like using a worst case scenario for what ultimately becomes something that feeds into the clustering illusion fallacy with what functions as fearmongering.
Hey, those are some cool $2 arguments you got there, Lin. Mind if I tell you why they're bullshit? So first, let's talk about what the clustering illusion fallacy is, because I feel like you're misappropriating a fallacious argument where there is none. The clustering illusion fallacy is a cognitive bias of seeing a pattern in what is ultimately a random sequence of numbers or events. It's kind of like the gambler's fallacy or the fallacy of statistics for those more familiar with those names, where the idea is that a random process becomes more predictable the more it's repeated. For an example, to give a better idea of what we're talking about, we can use the Monte Carlo casino example. During a game of roulette in 1913, the ball landed on a black spot 26 times in a row, which is a statistical improbability being 1 in 67 million. During this time, gamblers who were playing started bidding on red spaces because they were sure that the chances of landing on one were raising because of all the times it landed on black. Like, it just has to be the next one, you know? They lost a lot of money on it. Anyway, this doesn't apply to Spoctor's video, because even if he was saying that minors shouldn't join commentary, end of statement, then that's more because he's utilizing a series of already established patterns to predict the outcome of the next time that it happens. Because, let's be real, if you're a child online, you've gotten into a situation before, and you can try to call Spoctor out on cherry picking, but we have a plethora of examples using just this video alone. You've got Spoctor, Harley, Omnia, LS Mark, Just Stop, you know, all people that Spoctor had cited within the video as minors who got into bad situations. And then from the Spoctor drama, we also have Atari, who was a minor at the time. Plus, there's you and I who've gotten into our fair share of controversy and problematic situations, and you even acknowledged this fact at the beginning of the segment.
Speaking from my own personal experience, being a YouTuber has caused me to cross paths with a couple of individuals who I wish I never did due to tolls taken on my mental health.
Then we can connect the Spoctor situation to Ponder, who's dealt with other situations involving minors online, either as prosecutors or victims. Spoctor himself has covered several instances where minors were involved in particular situations. I know Harley's done it a couple of times, even if I don't have a ton of examples from them. Connected to me, I know your ass is not about to forget the likes of Sherman and Sylveon, minors who fucking stalked and harassed me for all of 2020 and 2021 respectively. Plus, you were a part of the situation involving Cosmic and Jolko, who had a beef with our local kids table, Umbris, Hypochromia, Stardust Zombie, and Fractured Light. Like, when does it stop being a random assortment of cherry-picked examples and instead becomes a pattern of behavior with children trying to make it online? Now, fear-mongering is also not what Spoctor's video is, because Spoctor's video is just once again trying to be a cautionary warning to children who are trying to make it in commentaries to be mentally prepared going into them. But even if it wasn't, fear-mongering requires exaggeration about danger, which Spoctor also never did in his video, or if he did, you're not going to point to actual examples of him doing this. You're going to just vaguely allude to a situation that happened, that actually fucking happened, and then we can reasonably say can happen again if Harley's testimony is anything to go by, without any sense of hyperbole behind it. So, even if he was at some juncture trying to instill fear into minors wanting to join commentaries under the pretense that their mental health will dwindle, the question then remains, is he wrong? Is he truly exaggerating this claim? And are you actually going to argue it? Or are you going to just say that it feels that way whilst insinuating that to be what Spoctor has wound up doing through supposed bad wording on his end that honestly wasn't even that bad to begin with?
And do I think that this is what Spoctor intended? No, not really. But this is just to better illustrate the harmful effects of constructing an argument this way.
You literally don't even know what his argument is. Stop.
And on that note, I feel like it's time that we move on from the training wheels and get into something a little more serious now.
Why do you exist?
I think we all know the problems with Kai Weiss by now. My second most viewed video is a video that goes over the subject, and plenty of other people have done so very well by now. For those who don't know, however, Kai was someone who rose to prominence during the Toby drama and had problems present in the way that they operated in the commentary community ever since that point, with instance after instance where they would mess up, play the victim card to get out of it, throw out a faulty argument built on fallacy to make themselves look correct instead of being correct, and acting holier than thou about it by walking away from everything confident that they were the ultimate victor in a given discussion when that just wasn't correct. Walking away from social media for a while and coming back to test the waters on if people are still going to criticize them, and misinterpreting arguments presented to poison the well, and blocking the critic when they have a little too much bite for them to handle, and they know that they can't manipulate their way out of what they did anymore. Like, come on, Kai. You were able to get us to like John Swan. How do you do that?
Okay, so heads up, there's gonna be a lot of moving parts within Lynn's next batch of points, so we might be going a bit long after this point. However, I do want to point out this recap of the Kai Weiss versus Akumu situation is incredibly telling regarding Lynn's ability to go into a situation, and I'll touch on it more as we continue. Also, I hope you guys liked my video on Lofi because it looks like we're going into round 2.
Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, it's because the flaws with Kai had been present throughout the entirety of their career on this platform, and despite that, Spoctor would maintain support of them.
Note that claim down, because there's gonna be a quiz on it later.
And not only that, but doing so by making some pretty stupid arguments in the process. More specifically, during the Akumu copyright strike drama, Kai had abused the copyright strike system to silence Akumu's video on them when it did not break any copyright laws at all, even going so far as to acknowledge that this was for the sake of getting back at him, only to roll back and try to convince people that their copyright was infringed upon when people made it clear that such a DMCA misrepresentation is not a good thing to do. And Spoctor tried to defend Kai, going on their stream that they made at the same time as John Swan's stream, where they talk about how Kai was perfectly within their right to do what they did.
It's not as big of a deal as they're making it out to be. And especially from a creator perspective, I feel like you were in the right to DMCA Akumu. Just in the same regard as I feel like Sen would have had the right to DMCA you. Peaches would have had the right to DMCA you. Anyone could have DMCA'd you. That's that's just how it works. The question is just the morality. How should I do it? Should I not do it? And you just decided to do it.
Lynn, don't think I didn't see your text there clarifying that you got this from Harley. I see you. You ain't slick. Oh, but why is that a problem? Well, in short, it isn't. At least in the sense that she got the clip from Harley. However, because she won't clarify what was going on in that clip, I will. Because while I'm not going to necessarily excuse Spoctor saying this, as I do not know the full context myself, and with what we're shown it was pretty stupid, but I'm also not going to sit here and let Lin frame this in a light that it isn't in. Harley made sure to clarify within their video, the video where Lin got the clip we just saw from, that Spoctor only really made such a claim from ignorance of the situation that he then went on to learn from after a conversation with Harley about the context.
Spoctor should not have appeared on Kai's stream when he wasn't educated on the situation. I believe that is generally something he should have thought about before doing. Spoctor is a large channel and generally his words have influence, so when he says something like Akumu's video wasn't fair use, if Spoctor makes a severe claim like this and then he's proven wrong, that could not only damage his reputation, but also in the moment it was said, it could affect the trajectory of the situation and how many people view it, despite the fact that the statement may not be true. I did raise this criticism to Spoctor in private, he accepted it and acknowledged that it was a valid point to make, and obviously me and Spoctor are always going to be on good terms, he's a nice guy. I do hope he does think ahead, he said he will for the future, and I know his perspective changed quite drastically after we sat down and watched through the whole of John's stream together. But I will leave that to his video. I just didn't want people to think that I was biased towards Spoctor and wasn't going to raise criticism against him based on the fact that I was friends with him. I still do think he was wrong there, and I still do hope that he doesn't do something like appear on a stream without being fully informed in the future. Credit to him for accepting my criticism. As always, Spoctor's a great dude, go check him out. That was a bit of a tangent, but let's continue the stream.
See, Harley makes sure to clarify that Spoctor just wasn't playing with a full deck and wound up learning from the situation after being educated about it. Whereas Lin, as you'll see here in a second, frames it as a malicious and conscious effort to support Kai Weiss in his false DMCA of Akumu, which is dishonest. And if you've seen my video on Lofi, you know exactly why.
When that simply is not the case. To put it simply, a case of copyright infringement is a balancing act between 4 different factors. Given how Akumu's video did not exist for the sake of serving as a marketplace substitute for Kai's video, it was an uncommercial work given how his channel wasn't monetized, and the nature of the work itself, being a response video, means that using clips for context makes sense to do on Akumu's end, the likelihood of this not being determined as a fair use work is incredibly slim, because even if you make note of how Akumu's video used a 4-minute long clip, that would simply not be enough to overturn the case on its own.
You know what I love? People who cite something that requires a source without linking said source. This isn't even necessarily a critique at Lindada's expense alone. I'm mostly pointing this at John Swan at this point because I had to hunt down where the court case source that he used in his coverage of the Akumu situation so I could double check if Linlin's rip from his video is yet again misappropriated.
There are many different interpretations of the law. Many things have happened over the past few years that have changed interpretations and changed how people interpret things. It's changed a few things. Let's talk about what being transformative and everything else actually means. Guys, there's 2 fair use lawsuits that I want to go over specifically right now. The first one is the H3H3 versus Matt Hoss lawsuit, and that's this one here, where basically the judge ruled in favor of H3H3. Okay, so here's the 4 factors that from the US Copyright Act 1976, there it is, bum. It specifically says no single factor categorically is categorically determinative in this open-ended and context-sensitive inquiry. So Kai's saying that only number 3 applies is not true, because not a single factor is categorically determinative. You can't just use one. It's a balancing act of all the 4.
On God, guys, commentators, drama boys, all of you, learn to cite your sources, and learn to archive where your sources come from while we're at it. Please! You have no idea when you or anyone else is going to need an archive or a source of information. I try to archive everything I can, even if it's not all public. I haven't deleted anything since I started commentaries, because it's always good to be able to call back to certain information exactly for moments like this. Christ! Anyway, no, Linlin didn't, not this time. But I'm still gonna bitch about that lack of sources though. Please, step it up, all of you.
Given a previous lawsuit that set precedent that fair use cases were context sensitive, and no singular factor can make or break the court's decision on its own. In short, the fact that Spoctor decided to use his credibility in the community to perpetuate the false narrative that Kai was in the clear here is a little dodgy to say the least.
See what I mean about Lin insinuating that Spoctor was much more malicious on that stream than he realistically was? Like, it's truly telling how much Lin is pinching from Harley in the most corrupt way she can, considering this is a point that Harley made, but way less charitable to Spoctor as a person.
Spoctor is a large channel, and generally his words have influence, so when he says something like Akumu's video wasn't fair use, if Spoctor makes a severe claim like this and then he's proven wrong, that could not only damage his reputation, but also in the moment it was said, it could affect the trajectory of the situation and how many people view it, despite the fact that the statement may not be true.
Harley's video states that Spoctor's uninformed support could be dangerous because he's a big channel that could negatively influence the situation, whereas Lin says that Spoctor was supporting Kai, trying to influence the situation because he's a big channel. These are two vastly different sentiments, and Lin's is far more toxic in the long run.
And if you wanted to make the excuse for Spoctor that he didn't have a script to rely on for this, well, I can understand that to a degree. It doesn't change the fact that he should have had his thoughts on the situation more collected than this, especially given how the law was a major factor in this situation. And even so, the no script argument isn't going to last you for very long because he made a video on the matter, and to put it simply, it was even worse.
But by this point, Spoctor had been educated on the situation and switched his view on the matter. The video's even called Prince Kai made an oopsie, like it explicitly states he no longer thinks Kai is innocent in the title.
The video simply reeks of the term fence sitter in almost every way, because it does make valid points against Kai, but also makes every single excuse in the book to try to either justify or downplay their actions while discrediting their critics. One way Spoctor tried to do this was by saying that the critics of Kai are allowing their moral compass to disregard Kai's own perspective.
One might question, I mean, it's a pretty clear-cut and dry situation. Akumu's an asshole, which you would be right in saying that. If so, how is it that other creators are criticizing Kai throughout this situation? What in the world? 2 words. Copyright strike. Akumu responded to Kai's first video in an epic 20-minute long video where he interspersed Kai's original video between clips of his rebuttals. You know, the good old-fashioned commentary way. But the weirdest thing about this response is that it's way more calculated than a lot of the tweets that Akumu typically releases at Kai. It's a weird change in pace to the random bullshit he spews on Twitter. And Kai struck the video down, well, because he claimed that Akumu infringed on his copyright when responding to the video. But he only said that after hours of discourse with other people criticizing him. And that left a sour taste in the commentary community's mouth. A very sour taste. You see, a lot of the commentary community is extremely sensitive about censorship and being able to say whatever they want. And that's understandable. In a community where the main point is to speak your mind, I'd imagine they'd hold the ability to say what they want very, very high. However, sometimes that moral compass can interfere with the rational understanding of other perspectives. Do I think that Kai should have struck down Akumu's video? No.
No. Kai had made their perspective very clear throughout the Twitter feud before this, and no one bought it because the arguments that Kai made were pretty fucking terrible. This just disregards a crucial part of the topic in order to make Kai's critics look worse and make Kai look like more of a victim.
So on the one hand, yes, Spoctor does empathize with Kai's perspective a little bit, trying to put everything into perspective because despite the fact that Kai made his motivations pretty clear, people were kinda overlooking that perspective. Spoctor even shows an example of that through Sir Optimus, and you're going to play that part in a bit, But then he goes on to explain the why he'd even bring up Kai's perspective shortly after this, being that people were trying to label Kai as inherently malicious instead of impulsive.
And this kind of outlines an extremely unfortunate circumstance where commentary channels will hop on the mistakes of others so brashly when given the opportunity without even attempting to understand the whys of the situation. Ultimately, the whys are just important as the whats, because detailing why someone does a certain action will make or break the difference of this guy is a bad person versus this person was acting on impulse. You have to say why. It's important. At least to me it's important, because character definition is very important to me.
Oh, but Spoctor is still painting Kai as a victim in this situation. He's not going hard enough on Kai. Hey, newsflash, you can be both a victim and a perpetuator of a situation. Just because one guy is in the wrong doesn't mean the other is automatically blameless in a situation. Hell, you can look at the cycle of abuse as an example. But in these situations, it typically takes two to make a drama, and if one party acts poorly in response to being a victim, congrats, both parties suck. This isn't inherently fence-sitting, this is acknowledging fault on both sides. It'd be fence-sitting if Spock didn't take a stance one way or another, but he's pretty solidified in the sense that both parties have their faults. Okumu's a fucking prick, but Kai shouldn't have DMCA'd him. These two claims can both be correct.
Next, Spoctor says that people aren't considering why Kai struck the video down.
However, my main issue with a lot of these commentary people is that they're not really paying attention to why things are happening. For example, Optimus criticizes Kai by basically shrugging off Okumu as some mean boy that he should have ignored from the first place.
Kai struck down a video with a copyright claim, which was done against another YouTuber by the name of Okumu, who makes more political kind of content, in particular, also an extremely small channel too. But a 300 sub YouTube account was enough to really kind of kick this whole thing off and actually offend Kai so badly that this situation spiraled out of control. Obviously, people in the commentary community, we don't generally use copyright claims even when they're actually justified. Kumu did what most commentary channels would do, and responded with a video about Kai, and then Kai got fucking butthurt about it and decided to weaponize the copyright features of YouTube after making a video and all.
However, we don't consider the fact that Okumu has ban evaded Kai multiple times on his channel and on Twitter.
Because I've had to deal with months and months of harassment from Okumu. One of the most high instances of this thing happening being in this clip.
So we're just gonna have some tea?
Don't do this to me! Oh my god!
Except for the fact that we do consider that. And that is half of the reason why it is an issue. Kai made that strike for the sake of getting back at Okumu, and while no one here is supporting Okumu's actions taken against Kai here, using a copyright system to silence critique is not justified by that.
Hey, you wanna know who else agrees with this sentiment? Spoctor, in the video you're covering.
Since DMCA strikes are only considered illegal in bad faith, the question of striking down his video is not a matter of does Kai have the right, it is a matter of did he do this in fair faith. That is the real argument to argue here. And truthfully, putting myself in Kai's shoes, when YouTube hands me on a silver platter a way to take down a video of somebody that I hate, put a mark on their channel, and just do it like that, I mean, I can see why it's very tempting to take it and run with it. But considering Kai makes that same exact type of content, it looks extremely weird when he punishes Okumu for something that he's encouraged other YouTubers to do in the past. It looks extremely weird when Kai does the exact same thing to other creators like Sen, using 99% of his 8-minute video in their response. The argument becomes even weirder and harder to justify. Ultimately, including most of Kai's video could be deemed fair use. However, that's still a hard thing to bargain. But that's not the point. The point is, it's hard to look at this and see a fair faith DMCA strike. It's hard to see this and realize that Kai didn't do this to try and just one-up his opponent. And it's taking an argument to extreme levels that are way too far. And even if the court rules in favor of him, it means his stuff is bad too. It's hypocrisy. It's upsetting. We as creators don't like when companies file a claim on our videos that are very clearly fair use. We get mad. And the worst part is, those companies aren't going to take us to court because they know they'd lose. They just claim it because they know we can't fight back. We don't have the money or the time. It's the same situation here. Kai doesn't have the money to fight a case like this. Okumu doesn't either. And so, why would he file it if he didn't intend on taking it to court? He likely did it because he wanted to one-up the person that's been pestering him forever, and that is a mistake.
Like, come on, how did at least 500 people come to this video and think this was okay? God damn, I hate the drama community.
Abusing DMCA takedown strikes is wrong on principle, so you end up just throwing out one of the core pillars of the argument given by Kai's critics, while pretending that it helps Kai's case when it doesn't.
He literally doesn't, but go off, I guess. Apparently it doesn't matter how many times you say Kai's wrong. If you're not the most vindictive asshole on the planet, you're defending them. I hate it here, on God.
The next of Spoctor's arguments will probably surprise you.
We don't consider the fact that Kai is a significantly smaller creator than most of these larger boys, and a lot of the times it's a lot easier to pick on smaller creators when they don't have an army backing their side. It's a lot harder to ignore one stupid troll in your community when your community is relatively smaller compared to these larger people. And this kind of outlines an extremely unfortunate circumstance where commentary channels will hop on the mistakes of others so brashly when given the opportunity without even attempting to understand the whys of the situation. Ultimately, the whys are just important as the whats, because detailing why someone does a certain action will make or break the difference of this guy is a bad person versus this person was acting on impulse. You have to say why. It's important. At least, to me, it's important.
Not only does Spoctor play Kai's victim card on their behalf by throwing out how their critics are bigger than they are, as if that's relevant to the validity of their arguments in any way when it isn't, but also by throwing out the no bad tactics, only bad targets fallacy. You couldn't make this up if you tried.
Well, you're sure doing a great job at doing so anyway, Lynn. Guys, I think I'm livid. First and foremost, Lynn, there's no such thing as the no bad tactics, only bad targets fallacy. It just doesn't exist. Sorry. I don't know what fallacy you're trying to call to, but it sure as fuck isn't that one. In fact, no bad tactics, only bad targets was something MovieBop was once cited as saying in retort to someone concerned that his hatred of Gamergate went too far, so whatever fallacy you're trying to call out, I'm a spitball and say it has something to do with excusing bad actions to people you deem as bad, which, no! Spoctor isn't doing that, actually. Once again, you're cherry-picking parts of Spoctor's video to take him out of context, and I'm getting so fucking done with it. Spoctor doesn't support Kai's DMCA of Akumu. He might have at one point, but by the time of Prince Kai made an oopsie, he was informed that his initial stances were wrong, as evidenced by the whole video leading up to Spoctor saying that what Kai did was wrong. Oh yeah, there's also this tidbit too.
The real question would be to ask what Kai's intentions were when filing the strike. We all know Kai does not like Akumu. We also know that Kai does a lot in order to one-up his opponent. We also know that Kai's dislike of Akumu can play a big part into why he even filed the DMCA in the first place. It is blatantly wrong to abuse a system that exists for the sake of anger and bitterness, and from how things look, Kai appears to maybe have done it for those reasons. From the beginning, I was giving him the benefit of the doubt because I know him, we are buddies. However, after looking further into this, a lot of the other side makes very fair arguments. Kai knows nothing about copyright law, and in that same regard, it was also shown to me recently that I too don't really know that much about copyright law, especially after having a few conversations with people like Harley TBS and a few other people. I am a lot more educated on what's going on. Following me and Kai's conversation on his stream, I got a lot more information that really swayed my opinion a different way. And it's a lot clearer to me that Kai very likely would not have won that lawsuit against Akumu, and it's even clearer to me as to why Kai's criticism against him is so important to the commentary community, and by extension, a lot of YouTube, including myself.
But I guess we can ignore that part for our quite blatant agenda we're trying to push here that Spoctor is just that bad. Frankly, if I was to be that girl for a second, I'd probably label your video under the exact notion you're trying to pin Spoctor under, where your entire video is basically no bad tactics, just bad actors. I'm definitely saving this for my final thoughts though, so stay tuned. Now the other part of this argument, this notion that Spoctor is writing off Kai's detractors because of the size of their channels. This is also not what Spoctor is doing. Spoctor brings up the size of the critics' channels in context to the critics insinuating that Kai should have just merely ignored Akumu's constant harassment. I know we've already played the full thing by this point with our own thoughts interspersed, but if you'll allow me to step back and show you the bigger picture, you can start to understand Spoctor's point a lot better.
However, my main issue with a lot of these commentary people is that they're not really paying attention to why things are happening. For example, Optimus criticizes Kai by basically shrugging off Akumu as some mean boy that he should have ignored from the first place.
Kai struck down a video with a copyright claim, which was done against another YouTuber by the name of Akumu, who makes more political kind of content, in particular, also an extremely small channel too. But a 300 sub YouTube account was enough to really kind of kick this whole thing off and actually offend Kai so badly that this situation spiraled out of control. Obviously, people in the commentary community, we don't generally use copyright claims even when they're actually justified. Kumu did what most commentary channels would do, and responded with a video about Kai, and then Kai got fucking butthurt about it and decided to weaponize the copyright features of YouTube after making a video and all.
However, we don't consider the fact that Akumu has ban evaded Kai multiple times on his channel and on Twitter.
Because I've had to deal with months and months of harassment from Akumu. One of the most high instances of this thing happening being in this clip.
You were just gonna have some tea?
Don't do this to me! Oh my god.
We don't consider the fact that Kai is a significantly smaller creator than most of these larger boys, and a lot of the times it's a lot easier to pick on smaller creators when they don't have an army backing their side. It's a lot harder to ignore one stupid troll in your community when your community is relatively smaller compared to these larger people. And this kind of outlines an extremely unfortunate circumstance where commentary channels will hop on the mistakes of others so brashly when given the opportunity without even attempting to understand the whys of the situation. Ultimately, the whys are just important as the whats, because detailing why someone does a certain action will make or break the difference of this guy is a bad person versus this person was acting on impulse. You have to say why. It's important. At least to me, it's important, because character definition is very important to me.
Now, a point that has been said to write off detractors because of their size becomes one that's saying that it's easy for critics to write off Akumu as this harmless troll because they can do so. They're big enough to not have to worry about one obnoxious twerp poking fun at them at any chance they could, whereas Kai's audience was a lot smaller, so that one stubborn troll becomes a much more noticeable figure. It's not playing the victim card for Kai to denounce all forms of criticism against Kai's DMCA strike, mainly because if I hadn't made it clear enough, Spoctor doesn't believe that Kai's strike was valid or in good faith. What it's doing instead is putting Kai's actions into perspective because that perspective had been previously dismissed. But again, if you were just watching Lynn's video in a vacuum, you wouldn't know this.
And to add on to that, whether Kai acted on impulse is entirely irrelevant, because of the way that they defended their actions to the hilt on Twitter after the fact. After everyone had thrown every single way that Kai was not within their right to do what they did, they just kept doubling down over and over and over. So even if Kai did act on impulse, which doesn't make what they did okay in any way either way, it still would be an issue because they were made aware of why their actions were a problem and they just didn't care.
But that's, again, not Spoctor's point. Spoctor's point was that people were framing Kai initially as this malicious monster, whereas it's much more believable when you look at the full context of Kai's situation that he was acting on impulse. To further elaborate on why that is, a motivation is important to realize when covering a situation like this because someone who's an irredeemable fuckwit to the public eye could instead have had been someone making an emotionally driven mistake and could learn from the criticism given to them. Or like a publicly accused underage sex pest looking to get pornography from an art contest could have realistically had no intentions of having any pornography sent to them as a minor. Or, I don't know, someone who takes a pretty nuanced stance about a situation that people were labeling as black and white could have been publicly accused of fence-sitting instead, willingly and blindly defending an aggressor. The portrait painted of the accused becomes far less charitable when the facts are not all in a row, and without proper motive established, the situation can become far more exaggerated and dishonest than it probably realistically was. Don't lie about people, basically, is all this comes down to. This continual accusation of Spoctor trying to dismiss Kai's problems, this time with the John Swan stream being cited, also becomes particularly annoying when Spoctor, just after the segment Lindata has covered here, even mentions the stream in question.
Like I said before, a little after the situation started to escalate, John Swan and Kai agreed to go on YouTube and dispute and argue to one another on the entire debacle, and essentially, John Swan argued Kai into oblivion and basically won the argument almost hands down. A lot of Kai's mistakes coming into the stream unprepared.
Hello. So, what do you think of the stream so far? How's it going, man? How...
War stream? I didn't watch a single second.
Oh!
Immediately pressing John Swan on his thumbnail as opposed to the topic at hand.
My first thing is, like, why is Omnia in the thumbnail and description?
I already addressed this on Twitter. Omnia made some takes and her, like, story, like, some of her tweets were, like, integral to understanding some parts of the story, so that's why she's in there.
and then very, very quickly gaslighting him into asking for his qualification.
Like I said, okay, so you believe that they're right. So it's a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
You think that they're right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're arguing. So what makes these? I don't get it. So you think that they're right personally, correct?
I think they're right because I have legal statute, I have previous lawsuits, and I have everything else backing me up.
I want to talk about that. I definitely want to talk about that too. You studied law for 5 years, right?
I didn't study law. I've studied copyright law for 5 years. I'm not a legal expert. I said that in the beginning of the stream.
So you studied copyright law for 5 years. Did you study copyright law in like the U.S.?
No, I've just done reading. I've done lots and lots of reading.
You haven't studied copyright law in the U.S.
I said study doesn't mean you have to go to a school to do it. It just means you read up about it in private.
You had to go to a school, John.
No, I didn't study in the U.S. No, but all of YouTube copyright.
I'm not saying that you have to physically be in the U.S. Did you study U.S. copyright law?
Yes. All of YouTube copyright law is U.S.
Do you have a certifiable background?
I said to you no. I already said in the beginning of the stream that I'm not a lawyer. I said to you no already.
So you mean to tell me, John, that you have absolutely no certifiable background or anything that could even make you a verified source of information to go to about this, and you're weighing in on the situation?
Yeah, just like you strike the guy without knowing anything about law.
However, after listening to John Swan's entire live stream, I have a better understanding of where things went wrong.
Fuck.
And finally, the last point within Spoctor's video that I wish to respond to would be this one.
But maybe it would be fair to assume Kai thought that Akumu was including his entire video, and that was a violation of his copyright. In that case, Kai would have been filing a DMCA under Faith, which means ultimately it's not illegal. DMCA takedowns are a civil dispute, and they're never usually criminal. DMCA takedowns are a battle of ownership, similar to a divorce, and if Kai is in full belief that Akumu was in violation of his copyright rights, then he can legally take action. Even if he might be wrong, it's not illegal to file a DMCA under full faith, just like it wouldn't be illegal for Akumu to dispute the DMCA and get the video back up, which is something he could have done. And if Akumu did do that, by that point Kai would have had to sue him outside of YouTube in order to have it taken back down again and provide those documents to YouTube. That's just how the system works.
I feel like presenting the idea that Kai was making the strike in good faith is simply disingenuous at this point because of how, as we have previously established, that simply was not the case. They filed the strike to get back at Akumu. It had nothing to do with enforcing their rights in any way.
Hey, you wanna know who else agrees with you? Spoctor, in the video you're covering.
The point is, it's hard to look at this and see a fair faith DMCA strike. It's hard to see this and realize that Kai didn't do this to try and just one-up his opponent. And it's taking an argument to extreme levels that are way too far.
I hate this video.
And I find this exceptionally comedic when you see that Spoctor makes note of John Swan's stream with Kai in this video, and even that made note of how the strike was made in bad faith.
I have always, throughout my entire time on being in this platform and knowing of Akumu's existence, unfortunately, that I don't like him. So, like, of course I'm going to be happy that his video was taken down. And I hope that other people whose copyright that he's infringed upon also take his videos down. Like, that is the entire reason why I said half of the things that I said.
This is not a good idea. Do not say this, ever. Never. Just let this be a lesson on what not to say, because as soon as the court gets hold of this, they'll be like, wait, let's re-examine your intent here. Because he said, like, 20 seconds, 15, 20 seconds of him saying I was enforcing my rights and, like, going on, like, over a minute rant about how he doesn't like the guy and he wishes this would happen more often and more people would do it.
Therefore, Spoctor completely disregarded how the point that he is making to downplay Kai's actions was already disputed at this point. How no one noticed this, I just don't see.
Probably because at the end of his video he fucking acknowledges this anyway, so we can acknowledge he wasn't disregarding shit. Please stop.
And all of this is made even worse in a video that Spoctor made later where they only make light mentions of Kai, but he did make this point.
Then we have Kai West, scum of the fucking earth. I wish I went harder on the guy in my previous video, but I'm a little too nice for that.
How much ego stroking can you do?
Oh my god. Shut up. You're the one who constantly made reference to the fact that Spoctor was too light on Kai, painting him as a victim when that's not what he was doing literally 5 minutes ago. I do not want to hear it from you.
The problem with your video on Kai wasn't that you were too much of a nice guy to give criticism harsh enough to match the severity of the situation. It's that you were actively dishonest, downplayed Kai's actions, and played the victim card on their behalf.
Until you actually watch the video and realize he did none of those things.
And on that note, how about we take a look at that video in a little more detail? I'll be honest, this video just bothers me for so many reasons. The premise of the video is to talk about how many of the former Deviant weebs are being cancelled all at once. Why he needed to mention Kai other than to address his previous defense of them while also virtue signaling at the same time is beyond me, but whatever.
God, stop throwing around buzzwords when you have no idea what they mean. Virtue signaling is the action or practice of publicly expressing opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or the moral correctness of one's positions on a particular issue. Even if we were to presume that the last clip you showed was Spoctor stroking his own ego, it was not in the context of trying to make himself seem like more of a stand-up guy. It was saying that he went too easy on Kai in hindsight, most likely because of the domestic abuse that he went on to partake in, if this is anything to go by.
And then we have Kai West, scum of the fucking earth. I wish I went harder on the guy in my previous video, but I'm a little too nice for that.
Or, you know, the later segment where he actually talks about Kai's situation with Omnia.
We even have Kai Weiss getting cancelled now. This one isn't really as personal to me as the others, but I do feel like I should mention it to get it out there. And I won't speak too much on it myself, considering the sensitivity of it, but, you know, as of recently, Kai's been accused of domestically abusing Omnia, you know, in their own home. And Omnia posted all the relevant details on Twitter, including photos of the injuries and a breakdown of everything that happened, and, you know, I'll help get the word out, because the situation itself seems very messy, and I've always been kind of personally wary of Kai myself, so it's also very interesting to see these events play out. However, if what Omni is saying is true, I do want to put on the record that I should have been a lot meaner to this domestic abuser in my video on him, because that shit's fucking deplorable. Losers beat their partners. That's who beats their partner. Fucking losers do. But yeah, no, both of their channels are nuked now because of that situation, so they're gone. Phagos is gone. Geez, who's next?
Like, you can say it's Spoctor patting himself on the back all you want. I mean, it kinda is, but it's not virtue signaling. It's, if anything, regret that he didn't break his own moral compass of trying not to be nuanced and charitable when he probably should have.
Spoctor ends up getting to a point of discussing Phagos.
I've held my tongues about my opinions on Phagos on the channel for years because I don't particularly enjoy burning bridges, especially if it doesn't benefit me. But I've always been wary of the guy. I mean, he had a weird vendetta against me back in 2017 or 2018, which, to be fair, I was a dickhead back then, but that man was no better, so we can call it even there. So it's really interesting to see other people go through similar circumstances with the guy.
You having problems with Phagos gives you absolutely no right to say that what Chuli and Clown went through was similar in any way to what you went through. Feg was a spiteful knob towards you, whereas, in your words...
For example, one of my buddies, Phagos, has been outed by a creator named Vabzichin. I think I butchered that name pronunciation, but that's okay. He was outed for basically manipulating them into silence because he admitted to horrific things on the record.
So you know the severity of what Phagos had put them through, and yet you still have the nerve to try to be as much of a victim as you can and imply that he hurt you just as badly just for being spiteful. Fuck off.
Hey, Lynn, that's not what Spoctor said. Hey, Lynn, that is not what Spoctor said. He's not necessarily painting himself as a victim here, and I'm so tired of coming back to this point. He's just talking about how weird he felt about Phagos, and giving us a little bit of insight as to why he and Phagos didn't really much get along. And if you actually pay attention to the video, something you seem fucking incapable of doing given the rest of this video, you'll find what all Spoctor did have to go through that goes beyond just Phagos was kind of a dick, by the way. Love the actual dismissal of what Spoctor went through, very classy. First thing I can point to is how Phagos admits to threatening Spoctor, and while we don't know the exact details of the situation through either's video, we have a specific reference of the kinds of behavior that Phagos exhibited. Another instance I can point to are the visuals that Spoctor gave us during this moment.
Former friends that I had turned their backs on me and went so far as to join the people that so aggressively turned against me out of some weird sense of justice. The creator friends that I made suddenly seemed all too alienated, and the friends that I did have only served to participate in the community, and that brought me so much more torment.
Phagos was used as a visual reference here, indicating that he was initially in favor of Pentagrin and Story's allegations, and was willing to toss Spoctor to the wayside in favor of spreading the false allegations. Which, if true, while maybe not on the same level of extremity that Ponder, Chuli, and Clown Teeth went through, still would be similar in the sense that Spoctor was lied about by Faghost. Furthermore, in general, I don't think I much appreciate this victim Olympics you're playing here to dismiss the stuff that Spoctor had to go through, just period. Like, even if the situations were vastly different, Spoctor still had to deal with shitty behavior from Faghost. Faghost still harassed Spoctor in some way, so it shouldn't matter who had it worse or who's more of a victim to who, because at the end of the day, all of them had to experience Faghost's bad behaviors. Spoctor's experience doesn't suddenly become less valid because other people had it worse, especially considering that Spoctor isn't trying to say that he had it as bad, or worse, or whatever. He's just saying the two instances of behavior do seem a little similar.
And the next part I want to go over is when Spoctor covers Junkie, cause my god, that is somehow worse. He first uses sarcasm to convey the message that people shouldn't call Junkie out like this because he did so much for them.
You wonder why people are trying to ruin one another in this community. It's because of this mindset that anger and wrath wins. Oh boy, you lied to people. To the gulag you go! Forget the good you did for people. Forget the fact that you basically built the foundation of my channel and helped me get on my feet, Junkie. You lied about people, and someone decided to out you for it. It's time to crucify you and make you walk on eggshells.
As if that matters. You do realize that trying to downplay someone's awful actions with their good ones doesn't work, right? Junkie doing good for people doesn't excuse the fact that he had lied about people, betrayed their trust, and stabbed them in the back as soon as things would be most convenient for him to do so. How does doing some level of good mean in any way that these actions should be excused?
Cannot stress how much I hate it here. So Lynn, how in God's name do you manage to fuck up covering this segment of the video out of all of them? The one time you can say that Spoctor is actually dismissive of a situation, a time that Spoctor is low-key actually defending a problematic pattern of behavior that actively hurts someone, a time that Spoctor is, just bad. And instead of covering those problems in a way that points out how dismissive or best case scenario uneducated he is, you opt into, how does this change that Junkie lied? While only briefly touching on the underlying issue here. Ugh. Spoctor, at least in accordance to this video, appears to be under the notion that what Junkie's lies were not really that big, as emphasized by how he calls them little white lies a little later in, opting in to say that Junkie's actions were little things, a little annoying at worst, stuff that Junkie supposedly does.
Basically, he told a bunch of mini white lies about people. Oh man, someone showed you saying something in a private setting? God forbid, damn. Own yourself, dude. Own what you are and who you are. If DMs are ugly, address it. Don't go pointing fingers at the whistleblowers for bringing attention to it. It's apparent that you've hurt people. A lot of people. It's really not that bad. It's just annoying. It's the shit Kai did before he fucking decided to become an advocate for domestic violence. It's the shit Junkie supposedly does.
He goes on to talk about how private screenshots aren't actually that bad, how Junkie should own them, all the while again kinda underplaying the constant untrustworthiness Junkie exhibits in these multiple situations, and, sarcastically brushing it all aside because he doesn't really believe this to be that big of a problem. Especially not as big of a problem as Heaton Jar and the commentator formerly known as Jesp were alluding it to be. That's how it changed that Junkie lied, or at the very least, that's how it changed the impact that Junkie had on the numerous individuals he's lied about. Now, is Spoctor wrong about the impact Junkie had? Oh, of course. As someone who is directly a part of at least two of the situations cited, yeah, I very much believe so. But your argument isn't actually seeming to want to address that beyond a footnote.
So you said earlier that you weren't here to defend Junkie.
But I'm certainly not on Junkie's side here.
And yet, here you are downplaying everything that he has been called out for. To put it simply, I don't buy it. Especially when you tried to rope in connections to the Toby drama of all things.
And the funniest thing about all of that is that it's all connected to the Toby and the Hopeless Peaches shit.
And as I'm sure you're all well aware, he leaked the script that me, Manga Comet, and Future Butters all worked on.
That is still going on. It is a legitimate continuation, and it's just ridiculous.
When the principles of the matter would not have changed at all, whether it was a script about Toby, Peaches, or your mum. Branding this all as a continuation of the drama that everyone is tired of at this point serves to do nothing but make people want to look into things less. It is a frankly deconstructive argument that doesn't even make any logical sense.
Alright, guess we're back from happy Lynn made valid points land. That didn't take long. Like, for fuck's sakes, Lynn, are you that daft to where you'll accuse Spoctor of tying all of Junkie's misdoings to the Toby situation, and then continue to play the clip of Spoctor's video where he shows that it was Jar who did that first? Like, if your critique of Spoctor here is that he's guilty of tying it into a drama that everyone is, quote, sick of at this point, and therefore would make people want to look into things less because of it, then truly it's just a robot's fault for doing so in the first place, because Spoctor shows him to be where he got the presumption it was connected to the Toby drama first. This is not actually a valid critique of Spoctor, he's just going on information given to him. Also, speak for yourself that people didn't want to hear of the Toby drama by that point. Like, hello, are we going to forget that Just a Robot and I talked about that exact situation this year in a video that currently has like 120,000-ish views to it? Like, sure, it might not be the most popular of Robots videos, nor is it the best video about the Toby situation in my opinion, but like, you know, it's there. Actually, on that note, yeah, Cecil McFly's video too, a much better video despite the fact that she insinuates I'm an art commentator, but that also came out this year with like 400k-ish views. Maybe some were tired of it, but it's definitely not the unpopular topic you suggest it to be.
And that's why the video bothers me as much as it does. Spoctor talks about how much he has grown as a person since he left the DeviantArt ranting community.
The day I left that community of people was the day I started finding more healthy people in my life, and that's very telling. I stopped being so vindictive, I stopped being so wrathful and impulsive and manipulative. That situation in 2018 is stuck with you guys. Who I was and why it happened is still there too. I left. That anger didn't follow, and the fact that you guys bring it up more than I do in my day-to-day life is fucking hilarious.
And yet he shows throughout this video that he really hasn't changed all that much. And even if he has, not in a way that fixes any of the problems that this video outlines.
Then where does Spoctor show that level of impulse and anger that he says he's grown from? You never did point out those moments, or really like any moments that would otherwise prove that Spoctor hasn't grown from his worst aspects.
And on that note, it's time to wrap this up. Spoctor has grown to be one of the most successful creators within this community, growing out of being a deviant weeb teenager and talking about more general subjects. Despite the fact that he seems to try everything he can do to say what he think will be the popular opinion after a drama is over, while also doing what he can do to die on the hill of defending people who do not deserve it, while stroking his ego as he walks away from them when he realizes that that won't work anymore.
There's a lot of assumptions there, and not a lot of them make sense when put together. So let's go over each of them one by one. Says what he thinks will be the popular opinion. Where? The last video where he talked shit about the art community? Because that was the only one I could maybe think falls under this notion. The I'm 16 and wanna do commentaries video felt like it was just a general talking point that didn't have any broader context to it that would have made it much more of a hot button one. Or if it does, you don't demonstrate that. And the Prince Kai video has now been misconstrued as a defense of Kai when it wasn't, like twice now in just videos featured on my channel alone. So yeah, Kai was just in the wrong there. It doesn't have to be what everyone wants to hear, it just was how it be. That's just, like, correct. Dying Hill's not worth dying on. Again, where? You have, again, maybe one example being Junkie, two if we were going to persist our dishonesty regarding Spoctor's opinion on Kai Weiss, but that definitely doesn't apply to all three videos you decided to cover, so that definitely isn't fully applicable to your entire video here. Speaking of, stroking his ego while he burns bridges. Again, one example being Kai. Congrats, this also isn't applicable to everything you have covered in this video, so trying to insinuate that is just a persistent problem with Spoctor as a content creator doesn't work. When you're trying to make broad generalizations of a person's character as a content creator, you kinda need a good sample size of their behavior in order for this kind of method to work. Otherwise, these could all just be isolated incidents that only really apply to one or two videos. Like, you were, or maybe even still are, a slideshow commentator, and literally our entire MO is just covering individual videos and their problems, so you should know that a single bad video doesn't apply to those same people as creators. Isn't that right, TP?
Spoctor, I get it, fam. YouTube is your dream job and you have worked hard over the years to get to where you are now. I understand that. But as far as I'm concerned, that has no excuse to be at the cost of your integrity. And on that note, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.
And that's all she wrote. Guess I shouldn't be surprised that a video like this doesn't have any signs of actual criticism in it. It's formatted more like a fucking expose. It's no wonder it was titled as one, too. Anyway, we're done. Let's move on to my final thoughts, because boy do I have opinions here. What the fuck happened, Lynn? This is somehow worse than both the Omnizoa commentary and hour and 40-minute Gale bashing we saw years prior. Combine that with your canceled tryout between you, Fractured Light, and Cosmic. This is now the 4th year in a row I've seen something from you that could be considered among the worst commentaries I've seen each year, and barring the Omnizoa video, you just seem to get more vindictive each time I see you. Like, why? Why do you spend so much time driving yourself on spite of those who maybe make a bad video or two, to the point where you'll continually smear the names of those who did so? Like, are you actually cut out for this genre, or has your leafy inspiration developed some reprehensibly bad habits of trying to start shit with someone who may have accidentally stepped on your toes? I'm genuinely asking at this point because I'm not sure where else to take this video. This was dishonest to its core. You have somehow misrepresented every video you had covered, and frankly, after a point it begins to look intentional. Especially that Kai Weiss video. I don't know how you managed to get away with that well poisoning. Actually, on the note of that video, I want to call back to something that was said in that portion, being this idea that there was a no bad tactics, only bad targets fallacy. Okay, so like, let's ignore how that's still not a thing, at least not in the form that you're claiming it is. Instead, we'll pretend like it is for the sake of making a point that I feel is very potent to this video. I think this video is the perfect example of someone doing exactly that. You dislike Spoctor, so you deemed there being no bad tactics against him. Because outside of the sheer dishonesty of Spoctor's stances on everything, you take him out of context every chance you got, misused buzzwords, blatantly strawman him on a few occasions, poisoned the well on the second video, and looked at all 3 of his videos reductively. Just a bunch of bad tactics that generally make for a bad commentary, and even worse criticism. Considering this all comes off as intentional, I'm not even super sure what criticism I can cap all this off with that you'll listen to. Learn what context is needed, stop making videos on people you have a grudge against, learn how to manage your emotions better, break these fucking gross bad habits you picked up as a drama YouTuber. I don't know. I'm just not sure anymore. Have a good day. At least that's how I probably would have ended it if there wasn't more to cover. Yeah, so remember that walking away from commentaries video I mentioned earlier? Yeah, so as of writing this part of the video right here, I finally sat down to watch Spoctor's follow-up to Heaton's video, and I'm not a fan. It's definitely not the best apology video I've seen. In fact, Spoctor spends most of the time arguing Lynn's video, which was a choice. It was exactly what I feared was going to happen going into this video, because when you're this fucking dishonest about a person who has done wrong, guess what? They tend to be able to leech off that, using your own dishonesty as a scapegoat for their own problems. Which was something I was going to bring up in my initial final thoughts, but it slipped my mind. It also doesn't help Spoctor's case that he only very briefly went over the problems with the video he made about dissociative identity disorder on TikTok, which was a whole other situation that wasn't discussed in Lynn's video, so it ain't particularly relevant to my own video. As well, Spoctor kind of bends over backwards and makes some pretty stupid statements about his own perceived flaws, and it really puts both Lynn's video and Spoctor's attitude towards any sort of heat into a little bit more perspective. So again, let me put it out there that Spoctor's definitely no saint. But then I noticed Lynn was going to respond to it. It came out, and while I'm here, I may as well cover that video too, because there was no way this video wasn't going to end under the hour-long quota. It's a video about Lynn, for God's sake. It's a pattern at this point.
The video begins with covering my coverage of his video about minor content creators. And before we say anything else here, I do want to say that I'm not particularly all too big on that part of my original video myself. I was just ultimately arguing a subjective opinion against a subjective opinion for the most part, and that kind of thing doesn't really get us anywhere productive, really.
I'd say there's a lot more wrong with that segment, but I've already made that point clear.
That being said, I do find some of Spoctor's coverage of that segment to be a bit iffy. To conclude, this video feels like it is trying to pass off so many things as being systemic problems within the commentary community, and using that as a way to dissuade people who may be able to bring a whole lot to the community from ever joining it.
My video is just merely a suggestion to take to heart. I really have no quarrels with creators that are actually 16 and make commentary videos. I just wanted people to be careful and really think about the decision before they make it.
I never said in that video that you had anything against minor creators. It really does bother me that you resort to a straw man here when at the end of the day you don't even particularly need to. That segment was pretty shaky, to be honest, and yet you still end up resorting to responding to something that I didn't say.
Lynn, within your context, you explicitly state that Spoctor's video was effectively trying to dissuade people from joining the community. What is Spoctor supposed to take from that other than you think he has a problem with young commentators? I mean, that was the conclusion I also came to earlier in this video as any indicator. It's not helped by your example of Harley as a minor who can bring something new to the table if they have the drive to push past mistakes that immediately follows this. That adds to the suggestion that Spoctor is ignoring those types of people to accidentally push this agenda that kids shouldn't join because it's toxic.
To conclude, this video feels like it is trying to pass off so many things as being systemic problems within the commentary community, and using that as a way to dissuade people who may be able to bring a whole lot to the community from ever joining it, when people like Harley can prove that even if said creator is a minor, they are able to bring a lot to the community if they have enough of a drive to move past mistakes that they make and improve from them.
Like, reminder that Spoctor wasn't even saying that minors shouldn't join the community, just that if they were to join, to be careful and prepared for some shit to blow up. So with you pushing this insinuation, further exacerbated by you effectively calling Spoctor's points fear-mongering, if you're not trying to say he has problems with minors, which, fuck, I'll try to be fair and say that might be the case, your own video does a bad job at conveying that, which is a problem if your own video is anything to go by.
Overall, the video is actually pretty solid and makes quite a few good points. However, the way that these points are made and the conclusion that they are used to draw on is irritating in my opinion.
Which is another problem entirely with that segment, but whatever, you've already addressed this.
At the end of the day, I'm happy to agree to disagree with what that video was saying overall, but at the end of the day, don't resort to responding to points that no one ever made, especially when you are in a position to provide legitimate critique to what you were talking about.
Don't respond to a point no one was making. So, is now the best time to bring up that people coming to the conclusion Spoctor was trying to push minors out of the community is apparently something that has happened before? Like, as of scripting, the top comment on that video, that's not Spoctor, was this comment from Pegasus trying to clear the air about what Spoctor's overall point was, thus implying that there had to have been miscommunication somewhere. And looking through the comments myself, I see a few that are explicitly implying some form of don't do commentary that they're responding to, whereas a bunch of the positive comments that predate Pegasus's are also kind of missing the point. Look, point is, this isn't too far-fetched of an argument, and also could have been a point as to where this potential miscommunication could stem from between you and Spock, not helped by everything else I've pointed out prior.
Either way, he continues to respond to the parts of my video where I talked about his junkie video.
They go into a bigger meat of the video, where they start presenting me as this egotistical maniac. Like, I can point one specific example right here if we're gonna be all nitpicky.
Spoctor ends up getting to a point of discussing Feghost.
I've held my tongues about my opinions on Feghost on the channel for years because I don't particularly enjoy burning bridges, especially if it doesn't benefit me. But I've always been wary of the guy. I mean, he had a weird vendetta against me back in 2017 or 2018, which, to be fair, I was a dickhead back then, but that man was no better, so we can call it even there. So it's really interesting to see other people go through similar circumstances with the guy.
You having problems with Feghost gives you absolutely no right to say that what Chuli and Clown went through was similar in any way to what you went through. Feg was a spiteful knob towards you, whereas, in your words...
For example, one of my buddies, Feghost, has been outed by a creator named Vabzichin. I think I butchered that name pronunciation, but that's okay. He was outed for basically manipulating them into silence because he admitted to horrific things on the record.
So you know the severity of what Feghost had put them through, and yet you still have the nerve to try to be as much of a victim as you can and imply that he hurt you just as badly just for being spiteful. fuck off.
Dude, I was just adding on to what other people experienced by demonstrating that I've also had negative experiences. Like, I've also had negative experience. I'm not grouping myself into their world and saying, oh, I'm also a victim.
Except that you were, Spoctor. The entire thing I was calling out there was the way that you said that your situation of Feghost merely having a vendetta with you was as severe as the frankly abhorrent things that you acknowledged he did to Chuli.
Okay, so I guess we're just doubling down on this bullshit, apparently. Spoctor never said his situation was as severe as what Chuli went through. He said that the situations were similar. The similarity could have been that Faghost was lying about people or that he was mistreating them. This harping on the severity is an assumption at best on Lynn's end, because the severity of Spoctor's beef with Faghost was never properly established. Spoctor just brought up that he had beef with Faghost to talk about his own experiences with the guy, at least according to him, but even then that's backed up by what Spoctor was initially saying within the original video. You can talk about your negative experiences with someone without feeling victimized about it. In fact, that's probably why Spoctor never came out about Faghost threatening him, or why we've never heard of any prior beef between them, because Spoctor didn't really see it as that bad, but did notice it was a pattern of bad behavior that Faghost exhibited. Calling back to the explicitly mentioned threat and the implied spreading of Pentagon and Story's false allegations of him, let's stop acting like Spoctor has zero experiences in this field at all. I'm getting mighty sick of this.
Spoctor ends up getting to a point of discussing Feghost.
I've held my tongues about my opinions on Faghost on the channel for years because I don't particularly enjoy burning bridges, especially if it doesn't benefit me. But I've always been wary of the guy. I mean, he had a weird vendetta against me back in 2017 or 2018, which, to be fair, I was a dickhead back then, but that man was no better, so we can call it even there. So it's really interesting to see other people go through similar circumstances with the guy.
You having problems with Feghost gives you absolutely no right to say that what Chuli and Clown went through was similar in any way to what you went through. Feg was a spiteful knob towards you, whereas, in your words...
For example, one of my buddies, Faghost, has been outed by a creator named Vabzichin. I think I butchered that name pronunciation, but that's okay. He was outed for basically manipulating them into silence because he admitted to horrific things on the record.
So you know the severity of what Feghost had put them through, and yet you still have the nerve to try to be as much of a victim as you can and imply that he hurt you just as badly just for being spiteful. I honestly find it rather disgusting for you to say that this wasn't you claiming to be a victim too, because even though you didn't directly say that, what you did say insinuated as much regardless.
Where, in that clip at all, does Spoctor insinuate that he's had it as bad as Chuli? Again, saying something is similar doesn't mean it's as severe. Like, you could make a comparison to how someone runs an office to a dictatorship. That doesn't mean you're gonna get put on the gulags for breathing wrong. I'm noticing this comparison equals one-to-one mindset kind of becoming more common, and I kinda hate it. Like, are we forgetting what a comparison is? Like, in a comparison, you have to be able to determine what is similar and what is different. You're looking at relevant characteristics of two things to be able to draw two. In this case, how Faghost acts. That doesn't mean Spoctor was manipulated into silence about Faghost's false allegations of himself. That doesn't inherently mean Chuli was threatened from an old and deleted Discord account. That doesn't mean the two situations are as severe. So let's please stop acting as if a comparison has to cement itself into the severity of things. We get nowhere in conversations like this.
He then partially apologizes for the things I brought attention to regarding his treatment of situations involving Kai.
Even though, frankly, he had no reason to.
And I say partially there because he still finds a way to screw it up.
However, in regards to a majority of the other sections, I kind of see where you're coming from, you know, in the content. Like with my Kai videos, I was just trying to provide this overall synopsis for other people to decide like which side they'd want to be on. I try to clearly paint down both one side and the other side, but I have this tendency of being like an overall pushover with the people I talk to and get along with, and oftentimes I will get along with a lot of these creators that I communicate with. I'm not one to turn my back on people at the drop of a dime, because I absolutely hated when it happened to me years ago. So I end up just defending people and echoing their perspective. It's a debate. People share their opinions and their sides.
So you were just echoing other people's perspectives. In that case, I suggest that you hold said claims to more scrutiny before you provide your platform and credibility to them.
So which perspective was wrong? Kai's? Well, we already established that Spoctor didn't honestly think he believed Akumu infringed on Kai's copyright, so...
Said perspectives not being originally from you does not mean that you are exempt from criticism for perpetuating them. If you decide to platform a perspective that has its basis in a faulty argument, that's on you. And for you to just throw out the excuse that what you said didn't initially come from you seems to be just dodging responsibility at best.
No? He's taking responsibility for being a pushover and sharing Kai's perspective? Like, I don't see how him explaining that he has a bad habit of echoing his friend's beliefs is trying to excuse the action of doing so.
But then he decides to take it one step further and say this.
I really think these Phagost and Kai arguments are built off this pre-established notion that I'm some egotistical, two-faced, like, manipulator who tries to be the victim all the time. That's not really the case. I just really want to get along with people, and I try a little too hard sometimes. And it's really hard to get love from peers in a community where everybody's at each other's throats. It's part of why I fucked up so hard with my junkie commentary, which is another big point of discussion in these videos.
What? As I'm sure you might imagine, this is the part of the video that ultimately pushed my hand to make this one. I ultimately do not particularly jive with you pushing the notion that I went into things with a preconceived narrative, despite the fact that the conclusions I came to were drawn upon based on what I saw you trying to pull.
Which would be evident if you watched the video. Yeah, because there's no evidence of you explicitly painting him in such a light. No siree.
In short, the fact that Spoctor decided to use his credibility in the community to perpetuate the false narrative that Kai was in the clear here is a little dodgy to say the least. The video simply reeks of the term fence-sitter in almost every way. How much ego stroking can you do? Why he needed to mention Kai other than to address his previous defense of them while also virtue signaling at the same time is beyond me, but whatever. Despite the fact that he seems to try everything he can do to say what he think will be the popular opinion after a drama is over, while also doing what he can do to die on the hill of defending people who do not deserve it, while stroking his ego as he walks away from them when he realizes that that won't work anymore. Spoctor, I get it, fam. YouTube is your dream job and you have worked hard over the years to get to where you are now, I understand that. But as far as I'm concerned, that has no excuse to be at the cost of your integrity.
Have I mentioned yet that I fucking hate it here, on God?
So you are not only drawing upon the worst possible interpretation that you can, but you are also doing so while completely ignoring what I actually did to come to my conclusions.
Can I just say no you and make my life that much easier?
It ultimately pushes the blame off of yourself and onto me for viewing you negatively based on what you were doing.
Shut the fuck up. You read just as uncharitably into Spoctor's actions as he did to yours. You don't suddenly become exempt from your allegations against him just because you claim you were only going off of what he was actually doing in his videos. Especially not so when half the time what you accused Spoctor of saying or doing wasn't actually what was being said or done in the videos.
And I could continue to talk about the rest of the video, but I don't think that that's something I want to get involved in at this time. If anyone else wants to speak on it, then that's their prerogative, but talking about things like the DID video is not something that I am confident in my ability to do, given how it wasn't even a video I had time to watch before it was taken down. So I think it's time we wrap this up now. To conclude, this video bothers me to say the least. I thought that Spoctor would at least have come to the table without being intellectually dishonest, but given what we have discussed thus far, I stand corrected on that front. And it really irks me how so many people just lapped that up and accepted it. When if you set aside the Spoctor is never wrong fallacy for just a second, you would see that he was actively lying to you. Looks like this thumbnail aged like fine wine then.
Do you have any actual evidence of Spoctor willingly lying to his audience, or are you just saying that because you didn't like that he didn't bend to your every word when you took him out of context and misrepresented his stances on things? Because it's almost like you're once again trying to push a blatant agenda on the guy with uncharitable interpretations of his stances. Honest to God, I think Spoctor may have let you off too easy given how much he conceded your points against the Kai video. Ugh. Also, hey, yeah, the Spoctor is never wrong fallacy. Okay, so now I know you're just doing this to shield yourself from any possible arguments raised against your video. Here's a new one to put in your fallacy of the day calendar. The fallacy, which is where you disregard what a point is saying entirely because it's argued fallaciously or otherwise poorly. Not even like this is truly fallacious to begin with, because thinking someone is better than another person tries leading them on to be and pointing out that person's own intellectual dishonesty isn't inherently based on faulty reasoning. And if you truly think otherwise, man, do I've got some bad news for you, kid.
And I do want to take the time now to say that I know a lot of people didn't even want me to speak my piece and make this video here. And while I don't think that any of the people who took that stance did so in bad faith, some of the things that people have said simply dismiss the issue. Whether Spoctor left the community or not, whether you think that me sticking up for myself is just fueling drama or not, whether you think that I'm just milking the situation or not, and whether you think that this will backfire or not, I don't really have much of a choice here. If someone wants to actively make me look worse to make them look better while they are backing away from the community, I ain't having that shit. I have said it before and I will say it again. When someone wants to throw me under the bus based on arguments that just don't work, I am going to stick up for myself, especially given how a good amount of people were fooled by Spoctor at this point.
How do you expect us to believe that you're not trying to paint an agenda against Spoctor when you keep treating him like this Machiavellian manipulator set out to stroke his own ego with his lies? People were fooled by Spoctor, like, come on. Also, I know one of the people you were subtweeting, Aaron was only warning you ahead of time because he knew I had my eyes on it. And it's good to see that you didn't take the warning. Anyway, time for my real final thoughts because we have no more to talk about. Ahem. So again, I repeat, what the fuck happened? Both of these videos were very contingent on being intellectually dishonest about what Spoctor was saying. And while I don't want to say that it was just because you don't like him, I truly don't have much reason to believe that to not be the case. Like, to recap, within these two responses together, you shifted the blame of someone else tying one situation to something it wasn't a part of onto Spoctor when it was someone he was directly citing that initially made the connection to begin with, misused fallacies, if not flat out made them up to dismiss any possible counter-argument against yourself, looked down upon other communities by shirking off any possible instances of false allegations within your own community, held Spoctor's mistakes to the grindstone as if they couldn't possibly learn from them, while straight up claimed that he didn't get better shortly after he explained how he kicked a lot of his worst habits, constantly poisoned the well using either Spoctor's ego or Spoctor's attempt at nuance as a source of weaponry, misrepresented every video Spoctor had made in various ways, either through ignored context or through incorrect assumptions about his stances, and then took other people's videos out of context to reconstruct a portrait of Spoctor in a much worse light, underplayed false allegations as a mere worst-case scenario, underplayed being treated poorly and threatened using other people's trauma as a weapon to do so, and doubled down on that after being called out for it, and made the most uncharitable interpretations and allegations against Spoctor and probably some of the worst final thoughts that I've seen in a few years, calling him a liar several times, then outright dismiss or deny the actions and impact your video may have had after being called out for it, while standing holier than thou as you did so, may I add, claiming that you're better than the person you're alleging has lied about you as you constantly and blatantly, if I may add, lie in retort. When I say that this is your worst work, it does not come with any hyperbole or sense of irony to it. You are better off getting angry at Gale Force for making a handful of bad arguments about someone's Pokemon takes. I was serious when I said there gets to be a point it looks intentional. I meant what I said about this being dishonest at its core, and I really mean it when I said your own made-up fallacious arguments are the perfect representation of your own content here. Yes, even down to the Lin is never wrong fallacy. Whatever the fuck you were trying to pitch with that garbage. It definitely comes across as you vindictively going at Spoctor because he's gone and pissed you off for some reason or another. And to be frank, this is not okay behavior when you're going about commentating in this way with situations that are this serious in nature. Not only because it warps the drama kind of centered around you now, which, you know, is hilarious when you consider how many times you called Spoctor an egotist, but you also went in with half a deck of cards, couldn't format the commentary in any way except reductively and destructively, and it, to put it in the nicest way I can, fell apart. It's self-righteous at the best of times and dangerous at worst. Now, again, that's not to say that Spoctor has done no wrong, because he mismanaged just about every bit of the situation surrounding Junkie. He toned police victims, acted like third parties were better at speaking about a situation than people involved, and then followed to not apologize for months, tried to save his own hide when confronted privately about it, and his apology was fucking weak sauce following it, because not only did he not explicitly acknowledge what his faults were beyond vague mentions, and only briefly overlooked the DID video he made, I also was definitely not a fan of him being able to use your video as a scapegoat for his misdoings. But I'm also not a fan of him being able to use your video as a scapegoat for his misdoings. When someone is trying to cover a serious situation like you were and being this blatantly dishonest while doing so, it only really muddies the situation for outsiders and can be weaponized by the accused to dismiss most of what was said about them. Because hey, if you're not going to be honest about the accusations against someone's character, then why should they acknowledge your valid critiques when you look like you're in bad faith anyway? No, I'm not saying that's right. That's just about as dishonest as half the tactics shown in your video, but that's the end result when you're this uncharitable, when you're this vindictive, and when your video was as much in bad faith as this one was. I asked this question earlier, and I'll ask it again. Are you actually cut out for this genre? I'm not going to say that you can't be here, or that you have to consider quitting, but the emotional responses you keep making towards people, from Gale to Omnizoa to Joshua Culvyhouse and now to Spoctor, I seriously want you to consider how you come at these kinds of situations. Because if this is how you choose to present yourself in the face of serious allegations and situations that require nuance to it, then, frankly, you shouldn't be here. At least not staring in the face of accusations against someone's character, which, if you remember, is similar to my issues with your pedophile allegations against Omnizoa. I want to expect better. Honestly, I do. I have seen you try to grow as a commentator for 4 years now. But when these bad habits keep popping back up time after time and leading you to constantly make impulsive mistakes time and time again, there needs to be a change in how you approach things. And I hope you consider that moving forward. Have a good day.